The bell above the door jingled as the Johnsons entered, laughter and hope trailing behind them. Taylor slid into the cracked vinyl booth, her scholarship letter slipping from her bag and landing on the sticky table. Marcus sat next to her, his hand resting protectively over the letter. Lena scanned the room, her gaze lingering on the flickering neon sign that read, "Since 1985. Diane, the waitress, watched them from behind the counter, lips curling as she noticed the letter. Diane approached, menus in hand, her steps slow and deliberate. She paused at their table, eyes fixed on the letter's bold heading. With a flick of her wrist, she tossed the menus down, the corners splattering a drop of old coffee. "Afternoon?" she said, her tone clipped, not quite meeting their eyes. Taylor quickly tucked the letter back into her bag, cheeks warming under Diane's stare. Marcus caught the exchange, his jaw tightening. Lena offered Taylor a gentle smile, squeezing her hand under the table. "We're here to celebrate," Lena said quietly, her voice steady. Diane's eyebrow arched, her pen tapping against her order pad, the sound sharp and impatient. "Well, hope you can afford it," Diane muttered, scribbling without waiting for their order. Taylor's excitement faded, her fingers tracing the outline of the letter now hidden away. The neon sign buzzed overhead, casting uneven shadows that danced across Marcus's clenched jaw. Lena's eyes met Marcus's, a silent message passing between them. The air in the diner felt heavier, the welcome soured by something more stubborn than grease. Outside, the sunlight was bright, but inside, ambition collided with judgment, and hope felt just a little further out of reach. Before the story continues, please let us know from where you are watching this video. Write your city or country in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit like if you believe in stories that challenge injustice. Your engagement gives power to voices that need to be heard. Diane's footsteps echoed as she circled back to the Johnsons' booth, menus clutched in one hand, order pad in the other. She dropped the sticky laminated menus onto the table with a thud, her Employee of the Month pin glinting beneath the fluorescent lights. Her eyes flicked from Marcus's steady gaze to Taylor's hopeful smile, then to Lena's calm composure. Without a word, Diane tapped her pen against the edge of the table, the rhythm sharp and pointed. Taylor reached for a menu, hands trembling, just enough for her mother to notice. Lena placed her hand gently over Taylor's, steadying her. "Take your time," Lena said softly, her voice a quiet shield against the tension. Diane hovered, arms crossed, impatience radiating from her. Posture. She glanced at the family's clothes, her mouth twitching as if holding back a comment. The other diners stole glances, some curious, others pretending not to notice. The air grew thick, every gesture loaded with meaning. Taylor tried to focus. On the menu, eyes darting to the premium burger section. Diane's pen tapped again, this time slower, almost taunting. Marcus glanced up, meeting Diane's stare head-on. He didn't flinch. Lena's fingers traced the burger description, her calm a silent answer to Diane's challenge. A busboy passed by, wiping a table nearby. He shot Taylor a sympathetic look before hurrying away, his own discomfort clear in the way he gripped his rag. The unspoken rules of the diner played out in every movement, every glance. Diane's authority hung over the table, but Lena's quiet dignity refused to bend. Taylor looked up, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know what I want." Diane scribbled on her pad, lips pressed tight, the hierarchy unbroken but exposed. The moment settled, heavy and unresolved. Diane leaned in, her shadow stretching across the table as she lowered her voice. "Expensive items are on the back," she said, the words sharp, almost daring. Taylor's cheeks flushed, her eyes flicking to the menu's last page. Lena didn't blink. She held Diane's gaze, unbothered by the challenge. Marcus watched the exchange, jaw set, his hand resting on the table in quiet support. The diner's faded, "Since 1985" sign buzzed overhead, its light flickering as if struggling to stay alive. Diane's fingers drummed on her notepad, the sound filling the space between them. She glanced at the other tables, lips curling, in a tight, knowing smile. Taylor's hands trembled as she traced the menu's glossy page, her excitement for the celebration dimming with every second. Lena's voice, calm and steady, cut through the tension. "We'll have 3 premium burgers, please." Diane paused, her eyebrows arching in mock surprise, but she scribbled the order down without a word. A couple at the next booth exchanged looks, sensing the moment, but saying nothing. The busboy returned, clearing a table with hurried movements, his eyes darting between Diane and the Johnsons. The power dynamic in the room shifted, subtle but real. Diane's authority, once absolute, now felt brittle. Taylor glanced at her, parents drawing strength from their composure. The menu, once a symbol of choice, now felt like a test. Diane lingered a moment longer, then turned on her heel, her footsteps sharp against the linoleum. The camera lingered on the "Since 1985" sign, its glow weaker than before. In that quiet, the Johnsons' resolve grew stronger. The bait and bite of prejudice met with unwavering dignity. The scene closed on Taylor's hand resting over her mother's, united against the weight of old rules. Marcus reached into his jacket, his movements deliberate, and drew out a business card. He slid it across the table, the Sunrise Diner logo catching the light. Diane's laughter, meant to dismiss, died in her throat as her eyes landed on the embossed lettering. Johnson Family Holdings, owners Sunrise Diner Franchise Group. Taylor watched Diane's hand tighten on her order pad, the pen nearly snapping in her grip. Lena's gaze remained steady, her calm presence filling the booth. The scholarship letter, now fully visible beside the card, seemed to glow with quiet pride. The 2 documents, one of earned opportunity, the other of generational achievement, sat side by side, a silent testament to what the Johnsons had built and endured. Diane's face flushed, her authority slipping away with every second she stared at the card. The diner's background noise faded, replaced by the unspoken realization that the rules had changed. The busboy paused mid-wipe, eyes wide as he took in the scene. Even the couple at the next booth leaned in, sensing a shift. Marcus's voice was soft but unyielding. "We'd like to see the franchise paperwork with our order." Diane swallowed, her response caught somewhere between apology and disbelief. She nodded, almost imperceptibly, and stepped back, her posture no longer rigid. Taylor's heart pounded, not with fear but with a new kind of hope. Lena squeezed her daughter's hand, her smile gentle and knowing. The card and the scholarship letter remained on the table, anchored in a moment of quiet revolution. As Diane retreated to the counter, her authority crumbling, the Johnsons sat a little taller. The sun outside seemed brighter, its rays catching the logo on the card, a promise that the dawn would belong to them, not just in name but in truth. The bell over the door rattled as a delivery truck rumbled past, shaking the diner's windows. Diane stood frozen behind the counter, her eyes fixed on the business card still resting on the Johnsons' table. The neon sign outside sputtered, the 1985 flickering as if it sensed its own end was near. Taylor's scholarship letter, now fully exposed in the sunlight, caught a golden beam and glowed against the faded tabletop. Marcus leaned back, his shoulders no longer tense. Lena traced the edge of the card, her expression soft but resolute. The room's energy shifted. Other customers sensed the change, glancing at the Johnsons with new respect or curiosity. The busboy, gathering empty glasses, paused to offer Taylor a shy, encouraging nod before returning to his work. Diane's name tag, askew on her uniform, reflected the diner's tired corporate logo. She adjusted it with trembling fingers, but the badge seemed heavier now, its meaning hollow. She glanced at the kitchen where the cook watched through the pass window, brow furrowed, understanding that the day's order was different. The register drawer clanged shut, startling Diane. She fumbled with the receipt tape, hands unsteady. Marcus's voice, low and calm, drifted across the room. "We'll wait for the paperwork." Lena's eyes met his, a silent agreement passing between them. Outside, the neon sign buzzed and popped, the "Since 1985" dimming further with each passing minute. The camera pulled back, framing the Johnsons through the greasy window, their silhouettes outlined by the failing light. Taylor's letter shimmered, a symbol of new beginnings, while Diane's reflection in the glass looked smaller, diminished by the truth now out in the open. The scene settled into a loaded quiet, the air charged with the knowledge that the old order was fading and something brighter was about to take its place. James adjusted his tie in the bank's polished window, smoothing the creases in his only suit. Marcus, barely 10, stood beside him, clutching his father's hand. The bank manager greeted them with a practiced smile, ushering them into a room that smelled of lemon polish and old money. James placed his application on the desk, voice steady as he explained his dream. To buy the Sunrise Diner, to build something lasting for his family. The manager listened, nodding, but his eyes kept drifting to the demographics section of the form. He tapped a stack of folders, glancing at the clock. "We'll be in touch," he said, already reaching for the next file. James nodded, gathering his papers, dignity intact despite the coldness in the room. A week later, a letter arrived. Marcus watched as his father opened it at the kitchen table, hands trembling just a little. The words, "high-risk demographic," jumped off the page, sharper than any insult. James crumpled the letter, jaw set, but didn't let Marcus see his eyes water. He smoothed the paper, folded it, and tucked it away in a drawer with other refusals. That night, James sat with Marcus under the neon glow of the diner's sign, its promise just out of reach. "You see that, son?" he asked, pointing to the buzzing letters. "One day, we'll have our own place, you'll see." Marcus nodded, storing the moment deep inside. Years later, that memory would fuel Marcus's resolve. The image of his father's quiet strength, the weight of that rejection letter, and the unreachable neon sign would shape every decision he made. The world had tried to close a door, but James's dignity left it cracked open, just enough for Marcus to step through. Marcus stood in the back office of the diner, fluorescent lights humming overhead. He pulled open a dented metal drawer, the filing cabinet groaning as it revealed its contents. Dust floated in the air, catching the weak light. He sifted through a stack of folders, each marked "Resolved" in faded ink, the word a flimsy cover for what lay inside. He opened the first file, a complaint from 2016. Waitress accused of profiling black teens. The details were typed, but the signature at the bottom was missing. Marcus flipped to the next folder. Customer banned for loud laughter, 22 Hawaii. He read the notes, the language careful, always blaming the guest, never the staff. His jaw tightened as he realized how many stories had been buried here, each one a brick in the wall that kept people like his father out. A maintenance worker entered, pausing at the sight of Marcus surrounded by files. The man hesitated, then offered a nod before returning to his checklist. Marcus kept reading, the weight of each document pressing down. There were notes about maintaining the brand, about keeping the atmosphere comfortable. Not once did the files mention fairness or belonging. He found a letter from a former employee, the handwriting rushed. "I tried to speak up. No one listened." Marcus stared at the words, feeling the sting of every voice that had been dismissed. He snapped a photo of the letter with his phone, determined not to let it disappear again. The office felt colder as he closed the drawer, the secrets inside still humming with quiet pain. Marcus gathered the most telling documents, slipping them into his bag. He glanced once more at the cabinet, knowing these stories would finally see daylight. The wall of silence, brick by brick, was beginning to crack. A locker door slammed shut, echoing through the kitchen as the lunch rush faded. Maria, the Latina cook, pulled off her apron, hands trembling as she reached for a sheet of lined paper. She pressed her pen hard, the words carving into the page. "You called me too loud. I quit." Her handwriting was hurried, but the message was clear. She would not be part of their bitterness any longer. Diane entered, glancing at Maria with a raised eyebrow. "You're leaving early?" Diane asked, voice clipped. Maria didn't answer, just folded the note and left it on the prep table, grease stains from her fingers smudging the ink. She grabbed her bag, pausing at the door. The dishwasher, a young man with tired eyes, offered her a small nod of respect. Maria managed a faint smile, then slipped out the back. Marcus found the note later, wedged beneath a stack of order slips. He read it twice, the words burning in his mind. He tucked it into his folder, adding it to the growing evidence of what simmered beneath the diner's surface. In the dining room, Diane wiped down a table, her expression unreadable. But her grip on the rag was tight. The kitchen felt emptier without Maria's laughter, the air heavier. The other cooks whispered, glancing at the empty station she'd left behind. One of them, a middle-aged man with a limp, muttered, "She was the best we had." No one disagreed. Marcus stood in the doorway watching as the staff moved with less energy, the loss of Maria's spirit obvious. He glanced at the note again, the grease stains a badge of defiance. He slipped it into his folder, determined that Maria's words and her refusal to season their hate would not be forgotten. Taylor sat in the cramped office, the hum of the old computer loud in the quiet. She scrolled through hours of security footage, eyes heavy but determined. Then she paused, the screen freezing on a scene from a Tuesday lunch. Diane stood at the counter mimicking a family's prayer gestures, her voice pitched in mockery. The cooks behind her snickered, one covering his mouth, another glancing nervously at the camera. The timestamp glowed, 12:14 p.m., 3:15. Taylor's breath caught. She leaned closer, watching as the Muslim family waited by the register, unaware of the ridicule behind their backs. Diane turned, her lips curled in a private joke, and rang up their order with forced politeness. Taylor's hands trembled as she hit pause. She copied the file, labeling it justice.mp4. Her reflection in the monitor looked older, weighed down by the responsibility of what she'd found. She thought of her own family's moments at this counter, of every time they'd wondered if they were truly welcome. She printed a still from the footage, tucking it into her folder with Maria's note. The evidence was growing, each piece a reminder that the problem wasn't new, just hidden. In the hallway, the dishwasher shuffled past, glancing into the office with a question in his eyes. Taylor offered a small nod, a silent promise that the truth would not stay buried. Back in the kitchen, Diane laughed with a waitress, unaware that her performance had been captured. The cooks moved with uneasy energy, the memory of the moment lingering in their glances. Taylor closed the video player, her resolve hardening. The next step would not be easy, but she knew the story had to be told. The parking lot was nearly empty, the last of the evening light glinting off car windows. Marcus waited by the back door, hands in his pockets, his breath visible in the cool air. Mr. Rivera, the janitor, emerged from the shadows, keys jangling at his side. He hesitated, glancing around before approaching Marcus. Without a word, Mr. Rivera pulled a small flash drive from his pocket, pressing it into Marcus's palm. "Emails," he muttered, eyes fixed on the ground. "From her. She said to keep things traditional." His voice was barely above a whisper, but the weight of his words was unmistakable. Marcus nodded, closing his fingers around the drive. "Thank you," he said quietly. Mr. Rivera shrugged, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "I've seen too much," he replied, voice rough. "It's time someone did something." He looked up, meeting Marcus's eyes for the first time, a flicker of hope passing between them. A car door slammed nearby, making both men flinch. Mr. Rivera stepped back, adjusting his cap. "Be careful," he warned, his tone serious. Marcus nodded again, pocketing the drive. The neon sign above the diner's entrance buzzed, its glow weak against the coming night. As Mr. Rivera disappeared into the darkness, Marcus felt the flash, drive's weight in his pocket, a key to secrets long kept. He walked back toward the building, determination in his stride. Inside, Diane chatted with a customer, her laughter echoing through the emptying dining room. Marcus paused at the door, glancing back at the lot. The exchange had been brief, but everything felt different now. The evidence he carried was more than just files. It was a chance to break the cycle. He stepped inside, the night air closing behind him, ready for what came next. Taylor sat at her desk, the glow of her laptop screen painting her face in blue. She opened the folder labeled Justice, her fingers hovering over the video file. With a deep breath, she uploaded the footage to social media, adding a caption. "This is what we've been served for years. Season the hate." She hesitated for a moment, then hit post. Within minutes, her phone buzzed nonstop. Comments poured in, some angry, some relieved, many sharing their own stories. "She did this to my sister. I always felt unwelcome." There. Taylor scrolled through the responses, her heart pounding. The hashtag trended, the video spreading faster than she could keep up. In the diner's break room, Diane stared at her phone, her Employee of the Month photo hanging crooked on the wall behind her. She scrolled through the video, her face blanching as she realized what had been exposed. The cook, passing by with a tray, paused to look at Diane, then at the screen, his expression unreadable. The dishwasher watched from the doorway, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Marcus's phone rang. "Did you see it?" Taylor's voice was tight but determined. "It's out. People are talking." Marcus nodded, pride and worry mixing in his chest. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. Lena squeezed his hand, listening in, her eyes shining with resolve. The diner's phone rang off the hook, customers canceling reservations or demanding answers. Diane tried to answer, her voice shaking, but the calls kept coming. The staff exchanged. Glances, the usual routine, shattered. The air in the diner felt charged, every conversation now a whisper about what would happen next. Taylor sat back, watching the numbers climb. The truth was out, and there was no going back. The first spark had caught, and the fire was spreading. Taylor's phone vibrated so often it nearly slid off her desk. She watched as the hashtag #Season the Hate shot to the top of trending lists. Her notifications are filled with strangers' stories and screenshots. Someone posted a meme, Diane's face photoshopped onto a salt shaker, the label reading "Racist AF." Taylor winced, not at the cruelty, but at the speed with which the world now saw what she'd always felt. News chyrons flashed on TV screens in living rooms across town. Local diner exposed for discrimination. Marcus's phone buzzed with messages from old friends and distant relatives. "We had no idea, man." "Proud of you." Lena read the comments aloud, her voice trembling with emotion. "She called my son dirty. I never went back. We need more people like you." In the Johnsons' living room, the mood was tense but hopeful. Taylor's hands shook as she replied to a message from a classmate. "Thank you for speaking up. I was always too scared." Taylor typed back, "You're not alone anymore." Meanwhile, the diner felt like a different world. Diane sat in the break room, scrolling through her own feed, her face pale and drawn. The cook leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching her. "Looks like people finally noticed," he said, voice low. Diane didn't answer, just locked her phone and stared at the wall. The dishwasher, wiping down the counter, caught Taylor's eye as she walked by later that day. "You did good," he whispered, nodding once before returning to his work. Taylor smiled, a small but genuine relief settling in her chest. The digital storm outside contrasted with the quiet inside their home. For the first time, Taylor felt the world shifting, the weight of old secrets finally being lifted by 1,000 voices. The diner's computer chimed with each new review, the screen filling with 1-star ratings. "Diane called my locks dirty. My kid's birthday was ruined. Never coming back." The words stacked up, a digital wall of testimony. Marcus read them in silence, his jaw set. Lena scrolled through the comments, her eyes wet but fierce. At the counter, Diane tried to act unfazed, but her hand shook as she poured coffee. A regular slid his mug away, not meeting her gaze. The cook in the kitchen read a review aloud, voice steady. "They made my family feel small." The dishwasher paused, listening, then nodded in agreement. Corporate's printer in a distant office spat out complaint letters, the stack growing taller by the hour. A manager flipped through them, brow furrowed. "This is a mess," he muttered, glancing at Diane's name on the reports. He circled it in red, then tossed the letter onto a growing pile. Back in the diner, Diane tore up a printed review, the pieces fluttering to the floor like confetti. She bent to sweep them up, but the busboy beat her to it, his eyes meeting hers for a brief, loaded moment. He said nothing, but the message was clear. Things were different now. Taylor refreshed the Yelp page, watching the rating drop. She read, a review from a former classmate. "I always felt like an outsider here. Glad someone finally said something." Taylor replied, "It's time for change." The response was instant. Dozens of likes, more stories shared. The air in the diner was heavy, the usual chatter replaced by a quiet reckoning. Diane's authority, once so solid, now felt brittle. The truth had been written, line by line, for everyone to see. The old order was crumbling, one review at a time. Diane sat at her kitchen table, phone in hand, scrolling through her daughter's social media. The latest post, a bright selfie at a friend's house, caught her eye. She tapped the profile picture, expecting to see their usual family photo, but found herself cropped out, replaced by a new image. The family album on her phone ended with last year's Thanksgiving, her daughter's smile now reserved for others. She typed a message. "Call me?" The text stayed unread. Diane's finger hovered over the screen, her breath shallow. She scrolled further, noticing her daughter's bio had changed. "Living my truth." No mention of home, no hint of the diner. Diane's chest tightened. In the living room, the television played coverage of the diner scandal. Diane muted it, the silent headlines scrolling past. Community reacts. Calls for accountability. She set her phone down, rubbing her temples. The house felt emptier than before, every room echoing with the absence of conversation. Her daughter's friends posted supportive comments, hearts and fire emojis filling the feed. Diane double-tapped a photo out of habit, only to see, "You've been blocked," flash across the screen. She closed the app, staring at her lock screen, a faded photo of the two of them at the diner, arms around each other, before everything changed. Outside, the diner's parking lot was deserted. The neon sign flickering weakly in the dusk. Diane watched from the window, her reflection blurred by the glass. She whispered, "I'm still your mom." But the words vanished into the quiet. Upstairs, her daughter laughed on a video call, her voice drifting down the stairs, full of a freedom Diane no longer recognized. The distance between them felt wider than ever, measured not in miles, but in trust lost and words left unsaid. The boardroom was cold, the hum of a ceiling vent, the only sound as executives scrolled through their phones. Screens glowed with the botch season, the hate hashtag. Each post a new blow to the company's reputation. The CEO adjusted his cufflinks, eyes fixed on the table. "No comment until review," he said, voice flat, not looking up. A senior board member cleared her throat, shifting in her chair. "Should we address the media?" she asked, but no one answered. Another executive, younger, nervously tapped a pen against his notepad, glancing at the CEO for guidance. The stack of printed complaints sat unopened at the end of the table. The words "urgent" stamped in red. A junior intern, the only black person in the room, gathered her laptop and stood. She looked around, searching for acknowledgement, but found only averted eyes and blank faces. Her jaw tightened. She closed her notebook with a sharp snap and walked toward the door. The sound echoed, sharp and final, as she left without a word. The CEO finally looked up, meeting no one's gaze. "We'll reconvene tomorrow," he said, voice barely above a whisper. The others nodded, collecting their things in silence. One man lingered, staring at the window, watching the city lights flicker. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. Regret etched in the lines around his eyes. Outside the boardroom, the intern paused, taking a slow breath before stepping into the elevator. She checked her phone, scrolling past the trending hashtag, her reflection in the screen determined. The elevator doors slid shut, sealing off the room behind her. Inside, the executives filed out, the urgent stack left untouched. The only sound was the soft click of the door as the last one left, the weight of inaction settling over the empty chairs. The morning sky was pale, streaked with pink as a crowd gathered outside the diner. Homemade signs bobbed above heads. Recipe for change. Dignity on the menu. Neighbors, students, and elders huddled in jackets, breath visible in the chill. The former cook, now running her own food truck, handed out steaming cups of coffee, her smile unwavering. A local pastor led a prayer, voice low but resolute. "We show up for each other," he said. Someone in the crowd replied, "Every day." Taylor stood near the front, Lena's arm around her shoulders. Marcus shook hands with an old friend, both men nodding at the sight of so many faces turned toward justice. Inside, Diane peered through the blinds, her face pale in the morning light. The closed sign hung crooked in the window, its meaning heavier than ever. She watched as the cook laughed with a group of teenagers, their energy contagious. The busboy, holding a sign that read, "Everyone welcome," caught Diane's eye and looked away quickly. A reporter snapped photos, the click of the camera punctuating the chants. "No more hate, no more shame." The crowd's voices grew, louder, echoing down the street. The protest was peaceful but charged, the collective determination impossible to ignore. Diane stepped back from the window, her hands trembling. She leaned against the counter, listening to the sound of the community. Rising outside, the kitchen felt colder, the absence of Maria's laughter and the cook's humming, a stark reminder of what had been lost. Taylor raised her sign, meeting the eyes of a little girl in the crowd. The girl smiled, hope shining in her face. Taylor smiled back, realizing the shift was real, that change had begun, not with a shout, but with the steady presence of those who refused to look away. The night air was heavy as Marcus sat in his car across the street, the deed to the diner resting on the passenger seat. The old neon sign buzzed, casting a pale glow over the empty lot. Since 1985 flickered, the numbers struggling to hold their light. Inside, Diane wiped down the counter, her movements slow, eyes fixed on the window. Taylor texted from the back seat, her message lighting up Marcus's phone. "New Dawn Eats opens next week." He smiled, pride swelling in his chest. Lena leaned over, squeezing his hand. The three of them watched as a maintenance worker approached the sign with a ladder, toolbox clinking at his side. The worker climbed up, unscrewing the faded letters one by one. Diane watched from inside, her reflection merging with the glass, face drawn and uncertain. The cook stood in the doorway, arms crossed, witnessing the end of an era. The busboy lingered by the door, hands jammed in his pockets, eyes on the ground. The final bulb sputtered, then went dark. The sign's hum faded, replaced by the distant sounds of the city waking up. Marcus exhaled, a weight lifting from his shoulders. Taylor snapped a photo, capturing the moment the old order ended. Inside, Diane stood frozen, the darkness outside pressing against the windows. She glanced at the empty tables, the closed sign now barely visible. The kitchen was silent, the clatter and laughter of years past gone. She reached for her name tag, unclipping it and setting it on the counter, the gesture final. Marcus started the car, the deed still on the seat beside him. Lena looked back one last time as they pulled. Away, the diner's silhouette swallowed by the coming dawn. The neon sign, once a beacon, now marked the end of what had been, and the promise of something new. The Johnsons stepped into the boardroom, the hush immediately. Marcus wore a tailored suit, shoulders squared, his presence commanding. Lena's vibrant head wrap drew every eye, her expression calm and unyielding. Taylor, in her Our Season the Hate hoodie, clutched a folder to her chest, her gaze unwavering as she scanned the room. Executives glanced up from their phones, some shifting in their seats, others pretending to read the agenda. The polished table reflected the tension, the overhead lights catching on Diane's Employee of the Month pin, now askew on her lapel. She sat hunched, eyes darting from Marcus to the CEO, her confidence nowhere to be found. A senior board member coughed, breaking the quiet. "Let's get started," she said, her voice thin. Marcus nodded, taking his seat at the head of the table. Lena sat beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Taylor remained standing, her presence a silent challenge to the room's usual order. The CEO cleared his throat, shuffling a stack of documents. He avoided Marcus's gaze, instead focusing on the papers in front of him. Diane fidgeted with her pen, tapping it against her notepad, the sound sharp in the stillness. A younger executive glanced at Taylor's hoodie, recognition flickering across his face before he looked away. Taylor's eyes met Diane's, and for a moment, neither looked away. The power dynamic had shifted, the old rules no longer holding. The room felt both too large and too small, the walls closing in around those who had once felt untouchable. Marcus broke the quiet, his voice low but steady. "We're here for accountability," he said, each word deliberate. The boardroom, once a fortress, now felt exposed. The Johnsons' presence was enough to make the air feel heavier, the future uncertain for those who had always assumed control. A projector hummed to life, casting a bright square on the boardroom wall. The live stream feed filled the screen, comments racing upward in a blur. "Fire her." "About time." "This is justice." Diane's face, caught in a loop from the viral video, flickered beside the scrolling words. Her skin paled, jaw tight as she stared at her own image. Taylor set her phone on the table, camera angled to catch the CEO's twitching eyelid and the room's uneasy glances. The air conditioning kicked on, the low drone filling the gaps between words. Marcus watched the feed, his expression unreadable, while Lena reached for his hand under the table, squeezing reassurance. A board member leaned back, arms crossed, eyes darting between the screen and Diane. The CEO cleared his throat, voice flat. "We're aware of the public's concerns." Taylor didn't blink, her lips pressed together. The hoodie's message seasoned the hate bold in every frame. Diane's fingers fumbled with her notepad, the pen slipping from her grasp and rolling across the table. A junior executive retrieved it, offering a tight smile before returning to his seat, glancing at the screen as another wave of comments demanded accountability. The feed cut to a split screen. Diane's viral moment on one side, the Johnsons' composed faces on the other. "This is what change looks like," someone typed, the words lingering before vanishing into the flood. Lena's eyes glistened, pride and pain mingling as she watched her daughter hold her ground. The CEO tried to regain control, but the boardroom's attention was fixed on the screen. Taylor's phone buzzed with notifications. The world outside, louder than any voice in the room. Diane shrank in her chair, the weight of judgment pressing down, her authority slipping away with every passing second. Marcus reached into his briefcase, the leather creaking as he drew out a crisp document. He set the franchise deed on the polished table, the Sunrise Diner logo bold at the top. The room stilled. Diane's fingernails pressed into her palm, her gaze locked on the paper as if it might burn her. The CEO reached a tentative hand toward the deed, but Marcus pulled it back an inch, voice even. "You sold exclusion," he said, eyes never leaving Diane. "We're buying change." The words landed with the force of a verdict. Taylor's phone, still streaming, caught the moment. Viewers flooded the chat with applause emojis and clapping. "Hands!" Diane's lips parted, but no sound came. Her authority, once so certain, now felt brittle. A board member shifted in his chair, glancing at the CEO for direction. Lena watched the exchange, her expression calm, her presence a quiet anchor at Marcus's side. Taylor slid a folder across the table, evidence of years of complaints and buried stories. "This is what you missed," she said, her voice steady. The CEO's fingers hovered above the deed, then retreated. He cleared his throat, but the words caught. A junior executive scribbled notes, his pen trembling. Diane's hand shook as she tried to steady her notepad, the lines she'd rehearsed lost. The air in the room thickened, every eye on the deed, every breath held. Marcus pushed the document forward again, this time letting it rest in the center of the table. "Decide who you want to be," he said quietly. The deed trembled in the loaded quiet, a symbol of the power shift no one could ignore. The moment stretched, the future of the franchise hanging in the balance, the old order exposed and waiting for judgment. Diane's hand hovered over her water glass, knuckles white. She reached for it, but her grip slipped, sending water cascading across the table. The cold liquid spread over the shareholder report, the words "record profits" blurring into a gray smear. The CEO jerked back, dabbing his sleeve with a napkin, eyes narrowed but silent. A junior executive quickly passed paper towels down the line, his hands shaking as he avoided Diane's gaze. The board member who'd been taking notes paused, pen suspended, watching the stain grow. Taylor's phone camera caught the moment, the live stream chat lighting up. That's karma. Clean up the aisle, boardroom. Diane tried to blot the spill, her movements frantic, but the report was ruined. She glanced up, searching for support, but found only blank faces and averted eyes. Lena watched quietly, her expression unchanged, while Marcus leaned back, arms folded, letting the moment play out. The CEO cleared his throat, voice clipped. Let's move on. He pushed the soggy report aside, refusing to meet Diane's eyes. The tension in the room thickened, the power she once held dissolving with every drop that soaked into the paper. A junior staffer snapped a photo on his phone, the flash quick and discreet. Within minutes, the image appeared online, captioned, "Jack's corporate tears." Diane's cheeks reddened as she noticed, her posture shrinking further into her chair. Taylor exchanged a glance with Marcus, both understanding that the spill was more than an accident. It was a turning point, a visible mark of the unraveling order. The boardroom, once a place of certainty, now felt unstable, every gesture and glance loaded with new meaning. The water seeped into the table's grain, a stain that wouldn't be wiped away. The meeting pressed on, but nothing felt the same. Diane fidgeted with her Employee of the Month pin, fingers twisting the metal until it loosened. As the CEO shuffled papers, the pin slipped from her grasp and clattered onto the hardwood floor. The sound echoed, sharp and final, drawing every eye in the room. No one moved to pick it up. Taylor's phone caught the moment, the livestream chat exploding. There goes her crown. Diane stared at the pin, its faded logo reflecting the overhead lights, now just another piece of forgotten hardware. A board member shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat but saying nothing. The junior executive who'd snapped the earlier photo glanced at the pin, then at Diane, his sympathy mixed with relief that the spotlight had shifted. Lena leaned in to Marcus, her voice low. Symbols only matter when you honor them. Marcus nodded, watching Diane's face tighten as she left the pin where it fell. The CEO avoided her gaze, focusing instead on the new logo displayed on Taylor's laptop. New Dawn Eats. Bright, bold, and unapologetic. Diane's hands trembled as she straightened her notepad, trying to regain composure. The pin lay between her chair and the wall, a relic of a reputation now lost. The boardroom filled with a heavy pause, the weight of change settling over every person present. Taylor zoomed in on the pin with her phone. The image beamed to viewers around the world. Out with the old, someone typed. Time for something better. Diane's shoulders slumped, her authority slipping away with the small metallic symbol. The meeting pressed on, but the energy had shifted. The pin remained on the floor, untouched, a silent marker of an era that had ended, not with applause, but with a single, resounding drop. The CEO uncapped his gold pen, the click loud in the tense room. He glanced at the termination papers, his hand hovering over the signature line. Diane's breath caught, her chest rising and falling as she watched the pen poised above her fate. Marcus nodded once, silent approval. Taylor's phone streamed every second, the world waiting for the final act. With a slow, deliberate motion, the CEO pressed the pen to paper. The sound of ink scratching across the page was unmistakable, each letter sealing the end of an era. Diane's eyes glistened, her hands gripping the edge of the table. The junior executive leaned forward, watching the signature form, his own relief barely hidden. Lena squeezed Marcus's hand, her calm unwavering. "It's done," she whispered. The CEO set the pen down, the gold glinting under the fluorescent lights. His cufflinks, engraved with Est 1985, caught the light, a last nod to a regime now finished. Diane stared at the documents, her authority dissolved. Her voice, when it came, was barely audible. "I gave everything to this place." Taylor looked up, her voice steady. "You took more than you gave." The board member who'd been silent throughout finally spoke. "It's time for new leadership." The CEO gathered the papers, stacking them with care. "This is what accountability looks like," he said, voice firmer now. Diane stood, her chair scraping the floor, the sound sharp and final. She didn't look back as she left the table, her footsteps muffled on the carpet. Taylor tweeted a photo of the signed document, the notification pinging as it went viral. The boardroom, once a fortress of certainty, now felt open, the future unwritten. The pen, still gleaming, rested atop the papers, a symbol of an ending, and the promise of something new. Taylor's phone buzzed with notifications as the meeting ended. Screens around the boardroom lit up with a new meme. Diane's face, photoshopped, onto a salt shaker, the label reading, "Bitter Service." The image flashed across social media, the hashtag trending within minutes. A junior executive stifled a laugh, glancing at Diane's empty chair. The CEO's assistant leaned over to show her phone to a colleague, whispering, "It's everywhere now." Marcus watched the meme scroll by on the live stream, his expression unreadable. Lena shook her head, a mix of sadness and vindication in her eyes. Taylor scrolled through the comments, reading them aloud. "That's what happens when you serve hate. Tables have turned." No tip for her. Diane's absence felt heavier than her presence. The pin she'd dropped still lay on the floor, ignored. The board member who'd spoken earlier closed his laptop with a soft click, the sound barely audible over the buzz of phones. The junior executive typed a quick message to a friend. "You see this?" Wild. The CEO rubbed his temples, the weight of public opinion settling in. "We need to manage the narrative," he muttered, but no one responded. The assistant scrolled through more memes, her lips pressed together in a thin line. The boardroom felt smaller, the walls closing in as the digital storm raged outside. Taylor looked at her father, her voice low. "It's not about revenge. It's about truth." Marcus nodded, pride and exhaustion mingling in his eyes. The meme flashed again on the screen, Diane's face a symbol of the old order's collapse. As the meeting dissolved, staff filed out, each person glancing once at the viral image before leaving. The hashtag Bitter Service lingered, the final word in a story that had been hidden for too long. Diane gathered her things in silence, her steps slow as she left the boardroom. The hallway stretched ahead, empty and echoing. Her heels clicked on the tile, each step softer than the last. Security waited by the elevators, badge scanner in hand. He nodded, polite but distant, and deactivated her keycard with a quick swipe. The small green light blinked red. She pressed the elevator button, glancing back at the closed boardroom doors. No one followed, no words of comfort or farewell. The junior executive passed her in the hall, eyes fixed on his phone, thumbs flying across the screen. He didn't look up. The CEO's assistant exited another office, pausing only to tuck a stray hair behind her ear before walking the other way. As Diane stepped into the elevator, the janitor scrubbed at the wall where, since 1985 had been, painted, the faded numbers dissolving under his rag. His radio played a soulful tune, the lyrics drifting through the corridor. "A change is gonna come." He didn't speak, but his eyes met Diane's for a moment, sympathy and distance mingling in his gaze. The elevator doors slid shut, the hum of the machinery filling the quiet. Diane stared at her reflection in the mirrored panel, her employee of the month. Pin gone, her posture slumped. She pressed the button for the lobby, watching the numbers descend. When the doors opened, she stepped out into the empty reception area. The receptionist offered a stiff nod, then returned to her. Computer. Diane walked through the glass doors, the city's noise greeting her with indifference. No applause, no recognition, only the cold air and the knowledge that her chapter here had ended. She paused on the sidewalk, looking up at the building one last time before turning away, swallowed by the morning crowd. Workers in reflective vests gathered outside the diner before sunrise, their breath visible in the crisp air. The old neon sign, now dark and lifeless, hung crooked above the door. Marcus stood with Lena and Taylor, bundled in coats, watching as the crew hoisted a new sign into place. New Dawn Eats gleamed in bold, fresh colors, the sunburst logo catching the first rays of morning. A small crowd formed on the sidewalk, neighbors and former staff whispering with anticipation. The cook from the old days clapped quietly, a proud smile on her face. The busboy, now promoted, snapped a photo on his phone, sending it to his mother. A passerby paused, grinning as the new sign flickered to life. Diane sat in her parked car, across the street, hands gripping the steering wheel. She watched the workers bolt the sign in, her face washed in the golden glow. The old neon, battered and rusted, was lowered gently to the ground, its era officially ended. The maintenance chief patted the metal, then wheeled it away, leaving the entrance bright and welcoming. Taylor squeezed Marcus's hand, her eyes shining. "We did it," she whispered. Lena wiped away a tear, her pride unmistakable. The crowd began to cheer, the sound swelling as the sign's lights grew stronger. A little girl tugged her father's sleeve, pointing up. "Look, Daddy, it's really ours now." Diane's reflection in her car window looked smaller, distant. She started. The engine hesitated, then let it idle as she watched the celebration. The new sign's glow painted her face in defeat and realization. She drove away slowly, the sound of laughter and hope drifting after her. The Johnsons stepped forward, unlocking the doors for the first time. The new chapter had begun. The old one fading into memory with the last flicker of neon. Sunlight streamed through spotless windows as the Johnsons stepped inside their newly rebranded diner. The tables gleamed, the air filled with the scent of fresh paint and hope. Taylor carried her scholarship letter, carefully pinning it to the new community board near the entrance. Marcus set down the keys on the counter, his hands finally steady. Lena walked the length of the dining room, her footsteps soft on the polished floor. She paused by the window, watching the last of the morning crowd disperse. The space felt different now, lighter, open, full of possibility. Taylor joined her, slipping an arm around her mother's waist. "We made it, Mom," she whispered. Marcus approached, wrapping both of them in a quiet embrace. The three stood together, their reflection clear in the stainless steel fridge behind the counter. No applause, no cameras, just a family, united and unbowed, savoring a victory earned through patience and resolve. In the kitchen, the new staff prepared for the day's first orders. The cook hummed a cheerful tune, the busboy arranged chairs with extra care. A bouquet of wildflowers, left anonymously on the counter, added a splash of color to the room. The register chimed as the first customer of the day entered, the sound warm and inviting. Taylor looked around, taking in the scene. "This is what it should have always felt like," she said softly. Marcus nodded, pride and relief mingling in his eyes. Lena smiled, her gaze lingering on the community board, now filled with messages of welcome and gratitude. Outside, the new sign shone bright against the sky. Inside, the Johnsons held each other, the quiet of the empty diner echoing with the promise of new beginnings. Their revolution was complete, not with the crowd, but with a family's embrace and the hope of a better future. Diane sat at her kitchen table, laptop open, the glow harsh against her tired face. She scrolled through job listings, clicking apply on anything that fit. Each time she uploaded her resume, fingers tapping nervously as she filled in her history. 30 years of experience, awards, references. She hesitated at the final step, then pressed send. Across town, a cafe manager opened her application. He paused, typing her name into a search bar. The results were immediate. News stories, hashtags, her photo beside words like discrimination and public outrage. He closed the tab, sighing. "Not worth the trouble," he muttered, moving on to the next candidate. Diane refreshed, her inbox waiting for a response that never came. She checked her phone, no missed calls, just another day of silence. Her daughter walked by, earbuds in, glancing at the screen, but saying nothing. Diane tried to smile, but it faded before it, reached her eyes. She sent out more applications, each one feeling heavier than the last. The world she'd once controlled had shrunk to a few lines on a digital form, easily discarded. She typed a message to an old co-worker, then deleted it before sending. Her phone buzzed. Another spam email, not the call she hoped for. In the living room, the TV played a segment about New Dawn Eats. The staff she once managed now celebrated for their warmth. Diane watched, her face unreadable, then turned away. She stared at her resume, realizing it was just another file in someone else's trash. The clock ticked on, the house quiet except for the sound of her own disappointment. She closed her laptop, the screen going dark. The world she'd kept out had finally closed its doors to her, leaving her on the outside, looking in. Workers in bright vests lifted the new sign into place as the sun created the rooftops. New Dawn Eats shone in bold letters, the sunburst logo reflecting gold, across the sidewalk. Marcus stood nearby, Lena's arm looped through his, both watching with quiet pride. Taylor snapped a photo, her smile wide, the scholarship letter peeking from her pocket. Former Sunrise staff gathered by the door, a black single mom, a transgender cook, a young man who once cleared tables. They unpacked boxes, laughter and hope filling the morning air. The cook adjusted her apron, glancing at the sign, her eyes shining. "Never thought I'd see this day," she whispered to the busboy, who grinned back. A customer paused, tears in her eyes. "My grandma wasn't allowed to eat here," she said softly. Marcus nodded, voice gentle. "She'd be welcome now." The old neon 1985 sign, battered and rusted, was wheeled to a dumpster. It flickered faintly, then went dark for good. Inside, the team arranged chairs and wiped down counters. Lena pinned a welcome note to the bulletin board. "Everyone belongs." Taylor helped hang a mural of community faces, each brushstroke a promise that exclusion was over. Diane watched from across the street, hands stuffed in her pockets. The new sign's glow painted her face in bittersweet gold. She turned away, as applause broke out, the sound echoing down the block. Marcus unlocked the doors, letting in the first rays of sunlight and the day's first guests. The staff lined up, ready, their nerves replaced by anticipation. The old shame was gone, replaced by pride and possibility. New Dawn Eats wasn't just a name, it was a promise, shining above the door for all to see. Diane stood behind the counter of a bustling food truck, her new name tag pinned crookedly to her shirt. Trainee. The owner, a former Sunrise cook she'd once dismissed, handed her a hairnet and a stack of order slips. "You ready?" he asked, voice steady but not unkind. Diane nodded, her hands trembling as she reached for the first sandwich. The line outside was long, customers chatting and laughing as the smell of fried chicken and collard greens filled the air. Diane fumbled with a to-go box, nearly dropping, it before the owner steadied her hand. "Take your time," he said quietly, his patience a sharp contrast to the way she'd once barked orders. A young woman at the window smiled, her eyes kind. "First week?" Diane managed a weak nod, cheeks burning. The woman accepted her food, leaving a tip in the jar marked, "Support second chances." Diane mumbled a thank you, voice barely above a whisper. The radio played, "A change is gonna come," the lyrics drifting through the open window. The cook hummed along, flipping cornbread on the griddle. Diane glanced at him, remembering the times she'd ignored his ideas, his jokes. Now she watched him command the kitchen with ease, staff moving in sync around him, A regular customer grinned at Diane, recognizing her. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said, not unkind, but honest. Diane offered a tight smile, focusing on the next order. The owner handed her a plate, nodding approval. "You'll get it," he said, returning to the stove. As the lunch rush continued, Diane's hands steadied. She listened more, spoke less, learning the rhythms of humility and teamwork. The name tag felt heavy, but it was hers to earn. Outside, the line grew, the world moving on as Diane learned what it meant to truly serve. Diane scrolled through her phone during a break, hands still smelling of fryer oil. Her daughter's latest post popped up at the top of her feed, a bright selfie taken outside New Dawn Eats. The caption read, "Real flavor, real family." Friends flooded the comments with hearts and fire emojis. Diane's thumb hovered over the like button, then tapped it. Almost instantly, a message appeared. "You've been blocked." Diane blinked, the screen blurring as she realized what had happened. She tried to view her daughter's profile, but every photo was gone, replaced by a gray silhouette. The family album in her own phone ended with a faded picture of them at the old diner, arms around each other, before everything changed. She set the phone down, rubbing her forehead. The laughter from the truck's window drifted in, the cook joking with customers, the new staff calling out orders. Diane glanced at her reflection in the stainless steel counter hairnet askew, name tag crooked, eyes tired. A customer at the window waved, snapping a photo of their meal. Diane managed a small smile, but her heart wasn't in it. She watched as the woman posted the picture, tagging New Dawn Eats and writing, "Best lunch in town." The post climbed in likes, her daughter's face visible in the background, radiant and free. Diane picked up her phone again, scrolling through old messages, rereading texts that once ended with, "Love you." She started to type a reply, then stopped, backspacing until the screen was empty. The distance between them felt wider than ever, measured in blocked accounts and words left unsaid. Outside, the sun caught the new sign across the street. Diane tucked her phone away, returning to work, her daughter's smile lingering in her mind, a reminder of everything lost and what might someday be rebuilt. The bell above the door chimed as the first customer stepped into New Dawn Eats. An elderly black man paused just inside, his gaze sweeping the bright, welcoming space. He moved slowly to the community bulletin board, running his fingers over Taylor's scholarship letter pinned at the center. Marcus approached, offering a warm smile. "Morning, sir." "Welcome," Marcus said, voice gentle. The man nodded, eyes misty. "My wife! She loved this place, back when it was different. She'd be proud to see it now." Lena joined them, placing a comforting hand on the man's shoulder. "We hope it feels like home again," she replied. Taylor stood nearby, watching the exchange with quiet pride. The cook peeked out from the kitchen, recognizing the man and giving a small wave. The busboy, now more confident in his new role, offered a cup of coffee at the house. The customer accepted, his hands trembling slightly as he took the mug. He sat at a table near the window, sunlight catching the edge of his plate. Marcus brought over a slice of homemade pie, setting it down with care. "On the house," Marcus said, the man's eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you. This means more than you know." The register chimed as the first sale went. Through, the sound bright and full of promise, Taylor snapped a photo for the community board, capturing the moment. The staff moved with purpose, each gesture thoughtful, every word kind. As the man finished his pie, he stood and shook Marcus's hand. "You've given this place its heart back," he said softly. Marcus nodded, emotion thick in his throat. The customer left, the bell ringing behind him, leaving a sense of healing in his wake. The Johnsons exchanged glances, knowing the new beginning was real. The thank you lingered in the air, a quiet blessing for all that was to come. Diane wiped her brow, the midday rush in full swing at the food truck. She reached for the pepper shaker, hands unsteady, and accidentally spilled too much onto a customer's fried catfish. The customer, a woman she recognized from her old diner. Days eyed the plate, lips pressed thin. Diane stammered, "Sorry, I can fix that." But the owner stepped in, voice firm but measured. "Season the food, not your pride," he said, taking the plate and remaking the order himself. Diane's cheeks burned as she stepped aside, her hands twisting the edge of her apron. The other staff exchanged glances, one young cook offering a quick, encouraging nod before returning to his station. The customer accepted the new plate with a polite thank you, but left no tip. Diane watched her walk away, the sting sharper than the pepper she'd spilled. The owner handed Diane another order slip, his tone softer now. "Everyone makes mistakes. Just don't let them define you." Diane nodded, swallowing hard. She glanced at her reflection in the window, the word trainee on her name tag standing out like a scar. The cook behind her started humming, filling the air with a tune that was both familiar and new. Diane focused on the next order, determined to get it right. A regular customer approached, offering a smile. "Keep at it," he said. "You'll get there." Diane managed a small, grateful nod. The owner watched her carefully, then gave a short, approving nod before turning back to the grill. As the rush slowed, Diane wiped down the counter, her movements steadier. She listened more closely, asked questions, and learned. The sting of the day lingered, but so did the lesson. The word trainee still felt heavy, but it was hers to change one shift at a time. Rain pattered on the alley as Diane made her way past the back of New Dawn Eats, her food truck paycheck folded tightly in her fist. The old 1985 neon sign, battered and rusted, lay discarded in a dumpster, its glass tubes catching what little light the gray morning offered. She paused, watching as a maintenance worker tossed another piece of the old facade onto the heap, the sound dull and final. She reached out, fingers brushing the cold metal. The sign flickered once, a faint blue spark dancing along the broken tubing, then faded for good. Diane's reflection shimmered in a puddle at her feet, distorted by the ripples. She glanced up at the diner's new window, the glass spotless and bright, her own image small and blurred in the glare. A young staff member from the diner stepped outside, umbrella in hand, pausing when he saw Diane. He offered a polite nod, his eyes kind but cautious. "Need a hand?" he asked. Diane shook her head, voice barely audible. "Just passing through." He lingered a moment, then returned inside, leaving Diane alone with the rain and the relics of her past. She turned away from the dumpster, the weight of her paycheck and her new name tag heavy in her pocket. The sound of laughter drifted from the front of the building, the kind she remembered but no longer shared. She walked on, shoulders hunched, the rain mixing with the warmth on her cheeks. As she reached the street, Diane looked back once more. The neon sign, once a beacon, now rested in its grave, the last flicker gone. The new window glowed, filled with light and possibility, but the reflection it offered was not hers. Diane moved on, the past finally left behind in the rain-soaked alley. The Johnsons stood beneath the new sign, arms linked, Taylor's scholarship letter framed in the window behind them. Marcus adjusted his collar. Lena brushed a stray curl from Taylor's forehead. The photographer snapped a picture, capturing their quiet pride. Inside, the staff gathered, smiles wide as sunlight spilled across polished tables. Marcus's voiceover began steady and warm. "They tried to recipe shame us, so we rewrote the menu." The camera panned over the community board, now filled with thank you notes, job postings, and drawings from neighborhood kids. Taylor's photo, cap and gown, hung beside the words, "Dreams served daily." The shot lingered on the kitchen, where the new cook plated a dish with care, the busboy arranging flowers in a glass jar. Lena poured coffee for a regular, her laughter soft, the room alive with hope. The bell over the door jingled as the first. Lunch crowd arrived, greeted by the aroma of fresh bread and possibility. Outside, Diane stood beneath a faded umbrella, serving cornbread from the food truck. Her hands moved with practiced care, her name tag still reading trainee. She glanced up as a little girl waved from the diner window, her smile hesitant but real. Diane managed a nod, a silent acknowledgement of change. The camera pulled back, sunlight glinting off the New Dawn Eats sign. The Johnsons posed for one last photo, their silhouettes framed by the doorway. Marcus's voiceover echoed. Change doesn't roar. It whispers. It grows. It is welcome. It's ours now. The scene faded to the sunlit horizon. The new sign, shining above a city ready to begin again. The story closed, not with fanfare, but with the steady, hopeful heartbeat of a family and a community finally seen.